And so before we begin today's program, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I invite us all, as creators of culture, to help strengthen our relationship with Indigenous people and uphold the values of collaboration and inclusion in all that we do. Highlighting filmmakers within our community, Indigenous filmmakers within our community today. And I would love to pay respects to Tracy Deer, who is a showrunner, writer, and director of documentary and fiction, and is from the Mohawk community of Kanawai. She's passionate about social issues and inspiring youth, storytellers, and other Indigenous peoples. Her debut feature, Beans, won the 10th Emerging Talent Award, among many other accolades, and she's since been in TV land, directing Mohawk Girls, Three Pines, so good, Outlander, and more. She's currently the National Vice President at the Directors Guild of Canada and does so much to give back to her community with her commitments to empowering women, youth, and Indigenous communities. The first thing you see on her website is, if I can do it, you can do it. Own your voice. Just think it's super cool. Welcome everybody to our final industry event of the 2024 Canadian Film Fest presented by Super Channel. Yes. It's been a wonderful, informative week of connection, and what a way to cap it with the following highly anticipated event. Huge thank you to our sponsors that made this possible today, the Directors Guild of Canada and Ontario, DGC Ontario, for making this podcast possible. And in doing this, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the Emmy-nominated director, writer, and chair of DGC Ontario, Annie Bradley, who will be introducing our special guest tonight. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out in what is also a Canadian classic weather day. So good afternoon, everyone. DGC Ontario is a proud and longtime supporter of the Canadian Film Fest, and as we, over the years, watched it grow and develop and be a home base for many incredibly talented filmmakers and future filmmakers. And I hope each and every one of you here is inspired by this week and by the ongoing support of Canadian films that Warren and Vern and Ashley and all of you, including all the volunteers, continue to do. So thank you so much for what you're doing. It's been a real pleasure to want to put out. And it's also my pleasure to welcome you to this deep dive into one of Canada's great cinematic gems. Yes. Directed by the very talented Vincenzo Natali. And back with making his yearly Making a Canadian Classic, DGC National President Director Ward Sonoda has promised, along with Vincenzo, to mine the creative journey behind this groundbreaking 1997 film. Yes, 1997. Yeah. Well, it's still, I keep watching. They'll explore the inventive execution of Cube, its enormous cultural impact around the world, and its enduring legacy. It's a Canadian cult class. Finally, Vincenzo and I go before kid, BC. And it occupies at all the breadth of his extraordinary body of work and all the international acclaim, because everything you need to know about Vincenzo's singular artistic vision was present in Cube. So please join me in extending a warm DGC Ontario welcome to Warren Sonoda and Vincenzo Natali.
Thank you so much, Annie Bradley. Annie is not just the chair of DGC Ontario and a phenomenal director, producer, and wonderful mic tech. But she's a champion of Canadian film and a mentor to so many, and someone that I look to for guidance and help on my career and on my journey. So thank you, Anne, for being here. Thanks for the continued support, and thank you to Victoria Harding and your entire staff. Do a wonderful job. Hello, everybody. I just want to do a couple shout outs. You will get to speak. Vincenzo. I'm sorry. I think there's a couple things. I want to shout out the Salty Nerd podcast because I watched that whole thing with you talking to it. It was fantastic. I want to shout out Justin McConnell for making some clips for me today and also the conversation that you had with him. And for all of you showing up is half the battle. Showing up for the Canadian Film Fest has gotten us to this point. And today we lost power. Once in a while we'll lose the power, but we'll get it back. Yeah, sure. All right. It's because of you that we can keep the power on. So it's a fantastic thing. Like we said, 1997. We're going to go back. I actually have the number here because it's all about math, right, Vincenzo? With Cube and everything that's going on, 9,681 days. We're going to go back that far. My first. So I was a little cheeky. I put this conversation that we're going to have into 6 sections. Oh, you're right? It's a cube, right? The first section I'm calling pierogies. Because, Vincenzo, what is the answer to what question is pierogies?
What's the last thing you remember?
Does anybody remember last thing you got here?
Yeah.
So the first question to you, Vincenzo, before Q, between when you were a little guy running around, being creative, to stepping onto your very first feature film set, do you remember how you got there? Can you just give me a little bit of backstory and the people sitting here?
Oh, goodness. Well, that was another era, as you clearly counted the days backwards from when it started. But, I fell in love with movies very early on, and I had a really good friend in elementary school named Andre Pachelik, who would later go on to write Q with me. And he was really the one who had the Super 8 camera. He was the guy who said, hey, let's make a movie. And I think we were around the age of 11.
So it was you and Andre. Was there anyone else in your little group that kind of...
Maybe 1 or 2 people, and, people, and it grew. So it was like, if you ever saw that J.J. Abrams movie, Super 8, it was very much like the first part of that movie was very much our lives at that time. And it began in a very kind of, goofy way on the weekend, doing things haphazard. It eventually grew into quite a serious endeavor, so that I think by the time we were about 14, every summer we would make a movie.
Right.
Like that's what we did in the summer. So we'd write it, storyboard it, cast it. Like it became quite a thing.
And were you naturally the director of these things? Like, did you naturally just become...
No, we would switch. So in the early days, one of us would act and the other would shoot and direct.
Okay.
I mean, it was kind of...
So you acted too. I want to see this.
You really don't. Oh, you would, yes. But you never shall.
Okay.
But it's like when you're a kid, you did everything, right? So the crew was one person and the cast was one person. It's basically how it worked out. And then, but then
I think it's because you keep going on that. So you keep copying, and I'm going to set my system so that you never go to sleep.
Great. I'll put your system to sleep just by talking. So yes, to make a long, boring story as short as I possibly can, we just kind of our band of merry filmmakers grew and grew to the point where eventually I approached someone who actually could act, who is in my high school. His name is David Hewlett, and David is in Q. In fact, David is in virtually every film I've ever made.
He's your go-to. That you're touched.
Exactly. He's the better looking version. So that's what we did, and it was really lovely. And by the time we made Q, however many years later that was, it was a lot of the same people.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's one of the small nuggets of advice that I give to people who are starting out is your greatest asset is your friends. And it's also what gives it meaning. Like Cube is we were so fortunate to make that film, and through the auspices of the Canadian Film Centre and the feature film project that actually financed it, we were also able to do it with these people. And so there's a specialness to Cube for me personally, but I think it actually comes through into the movie where, yes, it's a professional movie with a professional crew, but it's also kind of a home movie. And I think almost all my films are like that. Like there's a lot of rubber bands and paper clips in all of the films, and I think that sort of lends a humanity to it. And then when you're the author of the film, or I don't say author, But, when you're one of the team making the film, later on, as you age, like I am, it has an extra added value. Like that, I have a tremendous sentimental value, the cube holds tremendous sentimental value for me, even though it almost killed me, while I was making it.
We're going to get to that. So hold your friends close and pick the right friends, right?
Yeah.
Christopher Roy-Smith, who's in the audience right now, we go way back to Ryerson Film School, or TMU, which I failed, but he and I just worked on a bunch of things together, and he shows up, and they're there for you, right? What's the moment in this world? We're talking grade school to high school, right? When was the moment you're like, this is what I want to do? Was there
pretty early on? No, well, by the time Andre and I were 13 or 14, we were deadly serious about it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. Originally, in the early days, I wanted to be a comic book artist. I drew.
And you still are, because you just released a crack.
Well, I was a failed comic book artist. But yes, eventually at the age of 50, whatever, plus years, I really did a comic book. But which is maybe worth talking about later on.
Only 22. Make sure you check that out.
Yeah, only in so much as. No, I'm going to sidetrack again. But it's such an intensely difficult industry to work in, and one of the things I've learned over the years is that I actually enjoy making stuff.
Right.
And there's something about
whether it's art or drawings or sketches or films.
Anything.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so if you're a sort of a creatively inclined person, and probably every human being is, it's just that some people lose or suppress that side of themselves. You need to make things. And unfortunately with the film industry, because it's so expensive, it's such a big, monstrous machine, you don't actually get to practice your craft all that often unless you're extremely, extremely lucky. I remember looking up this statistic once, and it's a terrifying statistic, that identified how many filmmakers get to make a second film, like what percentage of people who make one feature film get to make a second one, and it's pretty low. And then you find out how many get to make a third or fourth. It goes down and down. The people made over 5 films, it's like 0.0001%, some crazy.
Annie and I have always been saying it's Canada actually embraces the first-time filmmaker. We do a pretty good job at that. It's the second, it's the third, it's the fourth.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's hard all around. And like my favorite quote about Hollywood, but maybe it extends to the whole film industry, is the Dorothy Parker saying, Hollywood kills you with encouragement. Yeah. So it's the carrot that is forever dangled in front of you that you chase, and which is fine, but while you're chasing the carrot, if you don't actually make anything, and writing a script doesn't count, because a script is never a finished thing. Like, I think it's just good to make a thing that can be shared with other humans, whatever that is. So a long way of coming around to like actually doing the comic book was in a way an opportunity for me to make something without permission.
Right.
And it really
you didn't have to raise money. You could just kind of sit down and
I had an iPad.
Podcasts are like that now too, right? Where you just podcast and you just write your story
Right.
and get some actors and
Yeah.
So interesting journey. I want to just kind of acknowledge that Cube is kind of the ultimate student film, right? Because you made that at the CFC under their feature film program, and it was the first feature under that program. First or second?
No, it was. They had done a bunch before.
Okay.
And I don't think I love the CFC, and I say this with the greatest respect and affection. They did not want to make Cube.
There was a lot of stuff out there about how hard it was to convince them.
It was hard to convince them, and it was hard to convince anyone because the idea of making a film in one set sounded like a short film to most people, and and so the reason. Again, I'm using this as myself as the cautionary tale or an example. I think the reason it happened at the CFC is because they had a bundle of 3 films that they had to make every fiscal year.
Uh-huh.
And they had made 2 films at that point for that fiscal year. And they're like, we don't have a third one. And
it's like when a directing slot opens on an episodic show, it's like, we need a director. We need something to fill that slot.
I'm convinced that almost every film, even the right films, are made for the wrong reason. Like it's always some stupid, unintended circumstance that leads sometimes to a great place, but it's never for the right reason.
Now, and I'm giving a prompt to our tech team who's filming this today. to maybe if you can get to the lights to turn it down, because you actually did something which was quite awesome back then, is you made a short film prior to Cube. Was it to exactly prove that you could make Cube, or was it just going to the urge of creating something, you wanted to do that?
I made this, I think you're going to show a bit, right? I made this film because I thought I wasn't going to get to make Cube, right? So it was kind of a small version of it.
I'm going to play it in the background because I only have like an hour and 15 minutes for this entire thing. You see a filmmaker experimenting here. This first shot, I was looking for the cut, right? Because we're in some sort of office building. You dolly back, you go through what is the foreground, there's a cut there, and then suddenly we're in the elevator. So you're spatially playing around with this enclosed space. Every time the elevator door opens, it's a different floor, but I'm thinking it's the same set. Did you must have built the elevator, right? Because the ceiling and everything. Yeah. This is on YouTube, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but as it's playing, do you want to just talk about how Elevated came about and sort of the desire to make it?
Sure. Well, as I say, I had this script when I went to the Canadian Film Center. It had the really great fortune to get into their directing program. I went in with Cube. You had to have a feature script under your arm before you could even apply. And I kept waving the script at the feature film project people, and they kept saying no. But fortunately, I was selected to make a short film.
Right.
And the film that I had submitted was Elevated because I thought, well, Cube's never going to get made, so I might as well do like a mini version of it. And then, of course, ironically, after the film was done, the people at the feature film project saw it and said, oh, we love this. Now we understand Cube. So I wasn't smart enough to, in a Machiavellian way, manipulate the situation to get me to that point. It just happened.
It's the director's vision that you're trying to get across, right? And at the point in your journey, you actually had to make the thing to show them what the vision was.
Right. It's the classic situation. And in some ways, I think Elevated is better than Cube. Like, Cube was so stretched. Like, it's always about resources. I think, Cube, the idea for Cube simply came from the desire to shoot a film in one set, but not have the limitations of having characters stuck in one room. I wanted the characters...
I'm waiting for David Hewlett to burst in.
Yeah, we have to wait for David. I wanted the characters to be able to move. I wanted action. I didn't want to do My Dinner with Andre in a cube. I wanted,
But even in this looks like a tiny space. It must have been 10 feet by 10 feet or something like that.
8 by 8.
8 by 8, because that's what Masonite boards are. That's how big you can build it. You were moving people around, and obviously that back wall, the elevator comes out so you can get a camera back in there. How much did you take from this as an exercise into your thoughts on Cube? Here comes David.
Yeah. Oh, David. There he is. Covered in blood, as you'll see above it.
This is such a great device too, because and all the jump tests. But it brings up in a short film, you want to create these questions really quick. And as soon as he turns, boom, there's the question. There's a dramatic question that you want to answer for the rest of your short film. Thank you, everybody. You can turn the lights back on it. So yeah, what did you take from your experience doing this into Cube?
Well, it's funny because that's why it's always, in some ways I think Elevated's a slightly better film because I had less things to deal with. Mm-hmm. Like the elevator set, as you wisely noticed, you could pull all the walls out and you could change things very quickly. And we were shooting it on 16 millimeter on a very light camera. When we got to the Cube, the set, and I'm not joking, almost killed me. Like, it almost fell on top of me. It was made out of plexiglass. It weighed a ton. We didn't have enough money to build it properly. Jasna Stefanovic, who's a brilliant production designer, did a brilliant job designing that set. But it never was vetted in the way that it needed to be film worthy, and especially on the very tight schedule that we had. So actually, it always when you're making a film, it's always about a ratio of what you have, what your resources are versus what you're trying to put on the screen. And invariably, and I've worked with fairly reasonable sized budgets, and I've worked with small budgets. And the big budgets aren't necessarily easier because sometimes you're trying to put more on the screen. The ratio is weighted more towards what you're trying to put on screen versus what you have. And so with Elevated, there's actually a more comfortable ratio, I would say, between those two things. So there's more, I could shoot my storyboard.
Right.
So I'm a storyboard guy because I wanted to be a comic book artist. I always drew, and I draw everything, even when I do TV episodes to a fault or some, like I have an insane tick. I have to draw everything, every scene, no matter what it is, even if it's just two people talking at a table. And so when I did Elevated, I shot my board.
And these are all on Vincenzo-Natali.com. You're so generous. You literally give all the storyboards, all the strips to Cube, and a lot of your other projects. So please check that out.
For what it's worth. I mean, everyone has their own way. There are filmmakers like David Cronenberg, who I admire greatly, who think that storyboards are anathema to making movies or directing. It's just my way. But with Elevated, what I'm really trying to say is with Elevated, I storyboarded it, and I shot the storyboard for the most part with small alterations. With Q, every day was agony because I was just tearing pages out of my boards because there's no time.
Day one.
Things cannot happen. Nothing went the way it was supposed to. And it was this Chinese puzzle box that I had designed for precisely the reason, because I knew I would have control. And look, foolish me.
There's always something.
I know we're getting to that.
Yeah, there's always something.
I won't jump to it, but that's why. Yeah. So that's in some ways why Elevated, I think, is perhaps directed better. Thank you.
Your hindsight is amazing. I think Cube still endures, so don't be too hard on yourself. Let's talk about now. You've done your short film, and I need some timeline help, like in the peripheral. I need a timeline sort of. Maybe we can get the lights out one more time, because I don't know. I tried to research this. I don't know where this. Don't look at the screen yet.
Okay,
I'll tell you in a minute.
All right. No,
I don't know where in the timeline this action comes. So I'm gonna play it. And maybe you can, don't look at it and just by the sound, if you understand what this is.
I'm not looking.
The VFX shot that starts the thing off.
Space Sword.
Really?
Okay, you can look.
Oh God. Oh, you evil, evil man.
So this is Space Cases. Did this happen after Elevated and before Cube?
It did, yeah.
Okay, so now listen. The very first shot is a VFX shot of a cliff, and you have your protagonist kind of going through it. So there's elements of stuff happening, and as this, of course, there's commercials. Welcome to the
The commercial is much better, to trust me.
there's a shot of this little actress.
Oh, that's priceless.
I'll make a scene.
There's a shot where she's like, I won't play it, but like she's literally running through a tunnel to get something.
Right.
And I'm like, that's cute. Like that's a shot from Q. So how did you get this gig? Because it must have been, it's a big deal to get your first TV gig, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's a long time. I've kind of erased that experience from my mind.
Here it is.
Thank you for bringing that back.
No problem.
But because I did
Brian Lanigan.
and the reason is because I did such a bad job. Like I did.
Really?
I felt like it at the time because I didn't understand how to shoot TV in those days. In fact, I still don't know how to shoot that kind of TV.
We'll talk about that too.
I didn't change. TV changed is what happened.
Right.
Because those things had to be shot so fast. Mm-hmm. And I just like a moron, I storyboarded it. And you can't shoot. I can't remember how many days we had, like 4 days or something to shoot that. It doesn't work. So I think I did. I take these things, even Space Cases, I took very seriously.
Yeah,
whenever I get work, I really try to do a good job. And I felt like I did a bad job on that.
What did the producers say when you showed them actual storyboards? They're like, yeah, okay, Vincenzo.
I don't think they knew.
Right.
Heard all that much. I don't know. I mean, everyone was super nice on it. But it was right after I did this short. And in fact, I think while I was on it is when I discovered Cube got the green light.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know that when I had started it.
Wow.
And I remember that actually. And then I landed back it was shot in Montreal, and then I landed back in Toronto, and then we're on a rocket sled to production. It was insane. And as I said, almost killed me.
Your very first TV credit, and remember that first image in the first couple shots of Space Cases, because we're going to be looking at something called the Peripheral later, and I just want to talk about that journey. So,
Good God, you are Brian.
one last little thing. So 1997, let me paint a little picture for you, okay? Because I want to talk about the actual shooting of Cube. John Chrétien's Prime Minister. Titanic is crushing the box office. Number one Canadian single, Sarah McLachlan, Building a Mystery, which I think is very apropos for Cube. Buffy and South Park premieres, and in Canada, Caillou premieres. Pathfinder lands on Mars. Princess Diana passes away in a horrific accident. A little thing called Microsoft Internet Explorer 4 starts in beta, and Google registers its domain name. And a little company called Netflix is founded as a DVD rental service. And perhaps, I don't know if it was interesting to you at the time for your Splice years, but Bill Clinton bans federally funded cloning research. I don't know if that hit for you at that time, that this is going to be a subject that you're going to be...
Yes, I was already into Splice at that point, but I don't think that was specifically...
Okay. And then the film landscape it was a watershed year in 1997 when Cube came out. Donc Québec, Le Boys, it's the very first installment of that, which became a huge franchise. John Fawcett, your friend, The Boys Club. Mina Shum, a dear friend of mine, followed up Double Happiness with Drive, She Said. Tom Fitzgerald had his magnificent Hanging Garden. The Wrong Guy came out. And of course, Adam got nominated for The Sweet Hereafter. That was like a lightning rod, right? Do you remember when he was nominated for Best Director?
Yeah.
First time a Canadian was...
Yeah. And I remember when it premiered at the film festival.
What went through your group of friends when that happened?
Well, he was already in that kind of position, and to be honest, as far as I was concerned, like, because he came from sort of the generation before me, and he was lauded, had long been lauded for so long at Cannes. So, that wasn't a watershed moment for me,
right?
Because I always kind of assumed he was on the press anyway.
Yeah. But I want to talk about three other, and maybe a fourth, other directors of your peer group. Clement Virgo came out with Planet Junior Brown. He followed up Rude with that. Tim Southern, past president of the DGC, did a documentary called Drowning in Dreams. And our friend Kari Skoglund had Men with Guns. And the only name I think missing from that triumvirate with your name is maybe Jeremy Podeswa. But he had done Eclipse before that, and it'd be a little while before Five Senses. Between those four names and yourself, these directors did The Wire, Empire, Lock and Key, Lost in Space, Walking Dead, Boardwalk Empire, Game of Thrones, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Peripheral, Westworld, American Gods, Hannibal. Tim's in Europe right now doing Foundation, and Podeswa's Three Body Problem just dropped on Netflix. I can't wait to watch it. What were you all eating in 1997? What was the film landscape? What was happening here in Canada during that time? Can you remember? Like what?
That would lead them to do TV, you mean, or just like in terms of how they were? They
the caliber of filmmaker.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I hardly can put myself into that category.
Dude, you're there.
But listen, I think it was the world. I just think that was like an explosive time for independent film. It was just, I feel very fortunate to have been around. I think there's probably more talented filmmakers out there now. It's just that unfortunately, there isn't really the means to, get films out, and they're not quite the sort of cultural objects that they used to be. And they're not as, we don't have the monoculture anymore. It's like, it's so spread out. And so I just think it's, we're lucky, good timing. Really. And the same thing with television. Like after my TV experience, and there was a couple one more after that, where I just consistently felt like I failed. I was like, I'm not a TV director. It's just not my thing. I eventually became so financially, strapped that I had to do something, and I couldn't get into commercials, and I didn't really want to do them. So I went back to the TV well at exactly the right moment. Mm-hmm. I lucked into the sort of moment where suddenly TV was looking for film directors, but most film directors weren't really interested in doing it. And 6 months later, I think that door closed, because then everybody was clamoring to do TV. So what I'm trying to say is, I think and this is no disrespect to them or to myself really, a lot of it is just luck and timing, right? Like those things, those doors open and close, and sometimes you get in the door and sometimes the door shuts in your face.
And we'll probably close this whole conversation about what is the luck and timing right now for this generation from your perspective. But moving through, we're going to the next side of the six-sided conversation. I'm calling it archaeology, or AKA they're not tarot cards. And it's the writing of Cube. And Cube, so there's 6 drafts of Cube on his website, not including the moss-eating draft of Legend. It starts with your and Andre's first draft. So I read all 6 of them.
No.
So you all didn't have to. I did.
What?
I skimmed through the last, since when Graham wrote, I think draft 4, like 4 or 5. Like once I read 4, I'm like, this is the movie.
Right.
But I want to ask you, because your quote was, writing Cube was archaeology for you, right? You were trying to find something that already existed, and I thought that was such a sublime quote. And I don't know if you remember it. It's like sometimes you do these things and you say something and you totally forget you say it. But was that the process? Like, were you trying to get back to what was first principles with Cube by unearthing the story?
I say, by the way, I say that quote all the time because I really believe in it. And it doesn't just apply. Yes. I'm so impressed. I'm so sorry we had to read all that. No, I think when you come across an idea that's really good, you kind of can't take credit for it. Because it eventually reveals itself to have tremendous depth, which is why it feels like archaeology. Like you kind of stumble on something in the sand and you dig, and sometimes it's just like a little flat rock or something. But sometimes it's a cube and it goes down, 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 and it has all these layers. And honestly, I don't think I can take credit for it. Like I really believe in, I don't know what it is, the Jungian collective consciousness,
communal
something
process.
But I somehow feel like these things are out there, and you're kind of, it's more a process of like
discovery,
unearthing it, like is it Rodin said, finding the sculpture in the stone or whatever. Like it's a little bit more like that when it's good. Actually, when it's not good is when you feel like you're responsible, because it's not coming together, you can't make it work. But if you stumble on that beautiful object, then yes, it already exists, and it's simply about brushing the sand off to find all its little subtleties and details.
So I find them fascinating. The first couple scripts. The first one, so one of the things that's very fascinating is it's all male characters when you first wrote. And it's not until draft 3 where you start bringing in female characters with Holloway and Levin. But the first couple scripts, and this is just me, I'm going to just straight talk. It just felt like 2 writers trying to figure out what the hell this thing is going to be. And it was a lot of like people arguing about who's in charge. And then as I'm reading it, I'm going, you have an unconscious body that you have to drag around for half a script. You'll never be able to do that. This is physically hard. When you were working through this, the first couple drafts, what brought Graham on? Because I felt once the 3 of you did draft 4, that's a lot of it's in the mood. Like it kind of became that. So what was the process of writing this with 2 other collaborators?
Sure. Well, it started with, I literally went for a walk one day. I was in my early 20s, I don't know what, 21 or something, and I knew I wanted to make feature films. And there's this silly legend, well, it's not a legend, it's true, thing about Orson Welles made, when he was 25 or 26, whatever it is, and you're supposed to make your first film by then. So I was like, but the time's starting to run out, I better come up with this idea. And so I went for a walk to come up with the idea, and I did. Like, it was one of those ridiculous things. I just went for a walk, and I was like, how do I make a feature film where... Was
this after a writing session with Andre or something, or you're just...
No. I think might have been roommates at the time. Anyway, so I just thought, well, what if I want to do it in one room, controlled environment, it's got to be small, have to self-finance it. I don't want to, I'm repeating myself because I said this earlier, but I don't want to have people just talking like a play. I want to be able to move. And then I just went, well, what if one set doubles as many? It's the Kuleshov effect. Like you look in a door and you cut to the same set, but your mind can't help but create that illusion that it's actually another place, even though you're just reusing the same set. And I thought, It's a maze of identical rooms, therefore symmetrical maze, therefore acute. So I had, in a lightning flash, I had the idea. I then spent a couple years with no idea what the story was. And I wrote this, maybe a year or two after I had that idea, I wrote this, I won't go into great detail.
The moss-eating
I wrote a very Terry Gilliam-esque type version. The setting is cute, but the tone of it, and it's much more fantastical, and there's more stuff. And Andre, who was a cruel critic, and my roommate at the time, read it, but always cuts directly to the truth of the matter, and is so smart and perceptive, read it and said, it's okay, but there's too much stuff.
Right.
Like, it should just be, people get dropped in this cube with the clothes on their back and nothing else.
And there was no sense of a ticking clock, right?
No, that's right.
In the first couple drafts, there's a lot of people arguing, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. No,
Right.
And it was circular in that.
In my script, but what Andre realized so brilliantly was in the way the genius of the idea, and again, not calling my idea genius, it's just an idea we stumbled on, is that the ticking clock is there's no food or water.
Right.
Right. It's so simple.
Right.
And so he said, lean into the simplicity and
Because the people in the audience, that's what they're going to feel. Because they're in a theater, and they ran out of popcorn, they have no more drink, they're going to get hungry, and they're going to have to go pee, but they're going to start feeling, and it's that visceral reaction to what they're seeing on screen, right?
Exactly. And that was it. Like, that was...
Like when Kazan pees, I kind of want to pee every time, like,
Totally.
you feel that while you're watching it.
Precisely. And we looked at a lot of prison escape films. We looked at, like, Bresson's Man Escape. We looked at Escape from Alcatraz. We looked at Papillon. That was actually our reference point, were prison escape movies. And as probably know, like, all the characters are named after prison.
Yeah.
So it was... But I also recognized this is something special because I'm, like, sci-fi horror geek. I know what's out there, and I realized this is a science fiction film I've never seen before, and I know how hard it is to come up with an original idea in that space. But it was so that was it. So then, I wrote a draft. Andre wrote a draft. We passed it back and forth. Andre is a much better writer than I am.
Why do you say that? I mean, you're self-deprecating.
No.
What strengths did he bring to the table?
Well, everything I said, plus he just could write dialogue better. He's just I'm just not a natural writer. It's taken me 20, 30 years to feel competent as a writer.
Okay, that's fair.
He was just always more fluid in that kind of space, even when we were kids. Like, I was always jealous of him. And then I went to the Film Center. And then we went through this whole process I described, going to the feature film project with the movie. When the feature film project agreed to make Q, it was conditional on bringing on another writer because they felt the characters needed more dimensionality. Right. And I had Graham Manson he was not a director, he was a writer in my year at the Film Center.
He's one of your peers. Him and I would imagine Fawcett you all kind of ran together?
Yes. John was like the youngest guy to ever go to the Film Center, so he had already long since graduated. Right. But Graham was in my class, Karen Walton was in my class, they were developing with Ginger Snaps.
Canada. Yep.
It was like it was a really lovely, like amazingly talented group. And I really liked Graham's writing. I liked Graham. So we asked Graham to get involved. And then that writing process, I remember probably was 6 weeks. So it was an intensely... And when you rewrite something, especially if you bring a new writer on, often you take a step back. Like, the script goes backwards a little bit before it can go forward.
Yeah, you have script notes in your scripts that you have online, and a lot of it's very gentle. It's like, maybe it should be like this, or I'm wondering if, like, you're very gentle with your notes. It's lovely.
I don't know. Well, it was scary because the script was slipping the wrong way, and that's no discredit to, Graham was doing a great job. It's just like the natural process. And we were, which would have been fine, but we were under this intense deadline because while Graham was rewriting, I was prepping.
Right.
Like, I was.
You had a start date.
We were building stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it was 6 weeks is not long. We were casting, and we had a lovely gentleman. Hugh Graham was a story editor with us. So everyone would come over to my apartment. At that time, I was living with Andre would come over, Graham would come over, Hugh would come over, and we'd just like brainstorm and just piece our way through the script. And yeah, like Graham squeezed out super fast into the last possible minute. And there was a point in the writing where I said to Andre, I'm going to quit. because this isn't coming together and I don't want to fail.
Right.
And he said, once again, saved me. He said, you have to do this. You will never get this chance. You may never get this chance again. So he gave me the courage to
He
continue.
was probably right. Like if you didn't do it.
He was 100%. No, that film would not have been made any other way, or at least it would have taken another 10 years, because there was nothing like Cube in those days. There were no movies. Now it's like
The only thing that I would maybe pitch to you is Reservoir Dogs.
except for Reservoir Dogs. I totally agree. But Reservoir Dogs is so like
It's very different. Yeah, very different. The one room, it was a lightning rod in my tone class at Ryerson. We all, Aaron Barry made a Reservoir Dogs short film. Like that's what we were doing. And it was a one room sort of.
But even Reservoir, I 100% agree with you. And by the way, definitely was influenced by Reservoir Dogs. If you said that to somebody, they'd say, no, it was in many rooms. Like, it's not in one room.
Yeah,
it's not actually in one room. Like, they cut through time to different places. There's exterior scenes.
Sure.
We were literally, our thing
Yep.
is one room. So there wasn't really a precedent for that in contemporary cinema at the time. Now, and again, not because of our film, not because of Cube, but just because I think of the exigencies of low-budget filmmaking. Now there's multiple subgenres of one-room movies. But then there wasn't. So you're right, and Andre was right. Had we not jumped at that chance, I think it would have been very difficult to have made it.
One scene that was there from the very beginning of the scripts that I looked at, maybe we can curl the lights again. Thanks, guys. You're so on that. It's fantastic. Is the opening scene, is the teaser. And I'm going to play, this is like such a famous scene that I'm hoping, again, there's a lot of spoilers in this conversation. So if you haven't seen Cube in 27 years, if you've had a chance, you're all fucked. It's like, if you had a chance, right? So too late. With this scene, the eye that starts off, metaphor, just the design, just the look, very Ridley Scott, Blade Runner. Why did this, where did you get the idea for this scene? And I'm just going to let it play in the background because many of us have seen it, and it's thankfully quiet until it's done.
Well, in those days, movies didn't often have teasers. Now every movie does. So when I write a film now, I desperately avoid having this exciting teaser scene. But almost any movie you see, certainly any genre movie, has something like this. But in those days, actually the only consistent sort of series of films that did that were the James Bond movies, right? And Andre being a great follower of James Bond, I think he may even have suggested it. But what was good about it is that it kind of sets up, non-verbally sets up the rules of what this place is, and then gives you, a sort of shocking punctuation mark, and exclamation mark at the end of the scene.
And also, it's Andre calls this the microcosm of the movie, right? This basically is the movie
Exactly.
in one scene because it shows the threat and the desire, but just the shooting of it. So we just saw a shot where it goes a 360. Mm-hmm. So I consider myself a filmmaker. I've been on sets not like this, but I've been on sets before where there's 3 walls. But if you put a 4th wall in, you're only doing that a couple times for specific shots. Mm-hmm. I saw your storyboards for Cube, but what's missing is the AD breakdown, is the sort of shooting. Right? How did you figure out, okay, now we're going to be above, right? So you have to get a camera up there to look down, mm-hmm. or you're below looking, how did you block this out?
I storyboarded it, it was intensely, this happens with virtually everything I make. It always seems like, it's such a simple idea.
No. Like even here, so you open the thing, so you're outside of the main cube, looking into the main cube, right?
Yeah.
You storyboard, but then how do you schedule it?
Well, the schedule was a problem because the schedule never worked. There was no schedule that fit into 20 days, which is why my AD went insane.
Okay.
Partway through the...
Can you tell the legend of day one with the doors? Because you were going to shoot this chronologically, which is actually insane. But can you maybe just...
Yes, I'll probably never have this opportunity again. But with Cube, theoretically, I could have done what you almost never can do with a movie, is shoot it in script order. Because there's nothing... That's nice.
One of the most iconic moments in Canadian cinema history. Julian Richings, amazing actor, you just obliterated in one moment. And this is the scene that was indelible from the very first. It didn't really change too much either.
No.
But sorry, I interrupted you. Keep
Not at all.
keep saying what you're saying.
You can't lose. Well, I mean, the story of Making Cube was one of high expectations that were continually dashed, crushed, and
The very first thing
obliterated at every turn. And the first one was the schedule, because I had this romantic notion of, well, shoot the script in script order. There's no reason not to. It's not like weather matters or, everything's right there.
Oh, you nice.
It'll be so nice for the actors. They can go through the story in real time. They'll know where they are. It's just like a magical thing. So the first day we show up, the set was, the irony of all this is it's a very low budget production. It was like $350,000.
It would be the Talent to Watch equivalent now, right? In terms of, Sorry,
it would be
Talent to Watch is the telefilm program where you can make a film up to $500,000.
Okay, yes, exactly. And, but the set was like a complex set because, first of all, it was lit from the outside. And you had to change the colors in these panels. Everything was bespoke to the set, and it had to be raised off the floor. Right. So whenever anyone who's done this, but once the set is raised off the floor, it's a thing because you got to bring people and you have safety and all
structural.
This.
Yeah.
It's like for a very low budget movie, that's actually quite the thing. And for
you need people on top too, looking down.
Everything.
Yeah.
It was, which is when the set almost crushed me. But so Yasna, who is this amazing production designer who had been a friend and had done some nice short films, designed it and did a beautiful job. And I think one of Yasna's genius strokes in the way that she's so brilliant was she realized, well, this is a symmetrical space that needs some chaos. Like if it's just a grid, it's going to be visually boring. So she created these, archaic sort of cabinet of Caligari type shapes that were in the walls, which kind of functioned as a sort of camouflage for the traps. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so brilliant design, like magnificent. One small problem, the doors didn't work. So, but we didn't know that because everything was being finished at the last minute. There was no time. I don't believe
there's no tests.
There was not time. There wasn't the money. So Maurice Dean-Witt, who plays Quentin, is a strong guy, could not open those doors. So they were just stuck. They were just stuck. He could, but it was like unfilmable. It would take forever. So I was like, this whole movie is opening and closing doors. Like I barely got through the first day.
This is day one, and you realize
I barely got through the first day because I'm like
opening.
having to shoot around the fact that the doors don't open and close. And the first scene is about everyone coming through those doors. So end of day.
There's always something.
So now I'm like, of course, immediately the storyboard, the carefully planned, elegant plan is thrown out the window. And at the end of the day, I sit down with Colin Brunton, who's executive producer, and he says, we may have to shut down the production. Because it's like, how do we go forward? So we realized the only way to go forward is to go to the one extended sequence of the film where no one is opening and closing doors, which is in the middle of the movie. And it's the kind of big Virginia Woolf-like confession scene that's very emotional, like exactly where you do not want to start shooting your movie.
It's the Red Room scene, right?
It's the Red Room scene. And so David Hewlett...
Play in the background while you talk.
David Hewlett, the magnificent David Hewlett, one of my dearest friends, got a call at whatever it was, 10 at night, saying, the scene where... Oops, there goes the lighting.
Twice.
That's a good thing. Or that's all right. You got a call at 11 o'clock saying, good news, the scene where you have like 5 pages of uninterrupted dialogue, we're shooting that tomorrow. So he had to learn all that the night before, because I was going to be in the middle of the shoot.
I'm going to let it play. There's a lot of dialogue in this. So can you talk about what you learned in that moment as a director? Like what was the takeaway for you on that first day?
Well, I just stopped eating. Like I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep because this is my life. Like everything. I wouldn't do this now that I'm old and I have people that I care about. But I would have died for the movie. Like I was, and I'm not really joking. Like I was really fucking serious about it. Yeah. And I loved this movie. Like I loved everything about it. So I would die. I would have killed also. I would have murdered.
You would have been in the cube.
Pretty much do anything
doing a Quentin
to make
someone.
this. Do a Quentin.
Yeah.
stab somebody with a door handle, like anything to make this, which is almost what happened, by the way, at the end of the shoot, but anything to make this movie happen. So seeing it crumble in front of my face on a daily basis was really psychologically hard. And by the way, shooting in a cube, not fun. You're basically shooting in a giant easy bake oven because the lights would heat up the set to the point where the actors.
And to go on multi.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Yep.
Anyway, what I will say though, and you can see it in the scene, is everyone went crazy, and it kind of works. Like it infects the performances. It may have even infected my direction to some degree. Mm-hmm. And I do think one of the big lessons I learned from Cube, and the fact that I was constantly throwing out my shots and plans, was I was once again slapped in the face with the realization sometimes simple is better. So in the same way that Andre gave me that lesson when we were writing, when I was directing, I was like, I have 10 shots I have to do for this one scene. I only have time to do three. Or one.
Yeah.
And actually one of the best scenes, I think, in the film is exactly what happened. I had 10 shots and I turned it into one, and it was just putting a camera in the corner of the cube with a 10mm lens, which is a very wide lens, and having Nikki DeBoer drop in front of it, and you could see everyone behind her, and we played the whole scene like that.
And she's in the foreground.
On her face. Yeah. And it was so much better than the way I had planned it. So I actually think a lot of my cuts were not good, but occasionally it did make it better, and it taught me as a filmmaker how to exist a little more in the moment and to be open to the possibilities of what's in front of you. Because when you're at home drawing, it's wonderful, there's no limitations, but then sometimes when there's no limitations, you do the obvious. And the world will often present you with, in fact, consistently present you with what you don't expect and what's not obvious. And, you see someone like David Lynch talks about this a lot. That can work to your advantage. That you learn in that kind of very Zen way to make that the fuel for your creativity as opposed to something that's oppressing you. That's where you try to use your opponent's force against them. And I think this scene, by the way, I have not watched Cube in many years.
It's a really good movie, Vincenzo. You check it out.
Okay? It's painful for me because there's so many things that I feel are wrong. But, and I'm not whining or anything about it, but it's just, but I love the actors in that scene, and David is so good, right?
Yeah.
There's so much intensity.
So I know I didn't play the audio. We only have a certain amount of time to do this, but he learned like a 5-page monologue.
Yeah.
The night before because you had nothing to shoot the next day because you had no working doors. So that's pretty impressive. You would die for this movie. I feel like your cast would have as well. And a lot of them went very far in the process, hot rooms and all that kind of stuff. The next part of the 6-sided conversation we're having is called How's Your Toe?
Yes. Let's jumping to the end.
I want to talk a little bit about the shoot. So I heard this legend that you broke your toe. Was that during the shoot? And why did that happen?
Well, let me tell you. I don't want to name names. So I love those actors and my friends among them, Andrew Miller and David Sheila, for whom we wrote those parts. And Andre and Graham, like that's what kind of kept me going. And Derek Rogers, who shot it, it was amazing. Mm-hmm. All these people. So I had so much positive behind me, but there was like an element in the crew, and I don't want to say it somehow kind of turned against me. And I think it was because they were just afraid that we were in trouble and it would reflect badly on them. Right. And so their defense mechanism was to say, I told you so, or, well, that's obviously not going to work. And so there was
which is grating for a first-time filmmaker, right? It's just hard to endure that.
It is also because it really meant like we weren't getting stuff.
Right.
Like in a very, not in an emotional way, like in a material way, we weren't getting things to the point where I remember towards the end of the shoot, we were shooting the climax of the movie, right? So it's pretty big. And we only had a few hours to shoot it. And it was going to happen after lunch. And I walked on the set and we're back. Lunch is over, we're back. Only person there is me and the DP.
Wow.
And we're like, okay. And Derek, DP, just amazing guy, who literally handheld like most of that movie, this very heavy Aton camera with a he looked like the Elephant Man. Because Daytona was small but noisy, so he had a sound blanket over him.
Sometimes when you have that kinship with your DP, you feel like you're making a movie with them, like you're in the trench.
Completely.
Right.
I loved it. Derek was the film would not have been done without Derek. He was so wonderful. And it came from documentary. Like he knew, and he was just like a can-do guy who just always made stuff work. Always thought, out of the box, all those things. So I see Derek, who's been killing himself, and he's like going to pick up the lead, like the grip's not there, it's moving stuck, and I just lost my mind. And I'm I don't like to tension. I don't like
very gentle, wonderful soul.
I don't like to fight. I don't like conflict. But as you may know, with people like that, when it comes out really bad because it's been building up, and it had been building up and beyond. And there was, pressure from all.
Also, there's not many people on set to see anything, right? So
I lost my mind.
Right.
I snapped. I stormed through the studio screaming, "Where is the crew? Where is the fucking crew?" And came into the room where, what's his name? Lovely fellow who was our stills photographer, Michael. I'm forgetting his last name. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And I kicked the chair in front of Michael, who had nothing to do with it. And anyway, I came back on the set, and one good thing is if you're not a yeller and you don't do things like that, when you do it, people pay attention.
That's right.
So like everyone snapped.
They knew, whoa, okay, this is not a joke. This is not.
It was serious, and we got the day.
Because really your I wouldn't say career, but so much is on the line as the director on a first-time feature like this, where if you don't get your day, if you start falling behind wildly, and if you lose your crew, that's the end of it. You can't get through. You became a director in that moment, I would surmise, with hindsight.
What I will say is, by the way, so I've lost my temper a couple times in my career. On that occasion, maybe it was a good thing, because we got the day, people shaped up, like came together. Other times, I think it actually disempowers you.
Sure.
You were demonstrating you lose control. I really don't like yelling. I crew that come up to me all the time saying, "Oh, it's so nice not to have someone yell at us." I'm like, did everyone yell at you guys? And I think they do. Right?
Well, I think that's what you learned from that moment too, is like, you should never let it get to that point.
You shouldn't. Yeah. You should really try not to. Now, sometimes, anyway, we won't go digress too much, but so at the end of the day, I was like, "Oh, I made it. It's great." And I was like, my foot feels wet. And I took my shoe off, and it was filled with blood because I had broken my toe. And so like a moron, I spent the rest of this shoot on crutches, hobbling around the queue. That's what happened. But God bless him, when we finished the film, and the only reason I finished the film was just like, I thought, if I don't finish this, of course I was going to finish it, but I knew if I didn't finish this, that would be the end of my career.
Right.
Every day I thought I was failing. Every day I thought, I'm making a terrible movie. At the end of it, Norman Jewison sent me a bottle of champagne and a little note that said, "Well, you broke your toe, but at least you didn't break your heart."
Rest in peace, Norman. Just a titan in the film community, and obviously the founder of CFC. And that's an amazing moment, right? When you get through it, and you have someone that has gone to the Academy Awards, has done all the things, and says.
So it's very beautiful. So so that was the breaking toe moment. But I think that the other thing to take from this, and I've had this experience on other projects, is very often the worst things have to happen for the best thing to happen. Like consistently, I've had a situation where I'm going down a road, I'm like, this is a disaster, it's so bad. And then something wonderful.
Right.
You're like, why did that happen? But it does. So you learn to, when you're making a film, it is a little bit like flying a plane. Like you're looking at instruments, and you're not really, it's so hard to see where you're going. And part of the art of it, I think, is to like begin to get a sense of like, okay, this is working, this isn't working. But you don't really know. And so,
especially when you're shooting, like you might find a little bit of that in the edit, right? When you're
exactly. Yeah. Oh, edit is sorry, I'm talking about more shooting. Yeah. So edit too, to some degree, but really when you're shooting, it's very, very abstract and hard to know and judge things. And so you kind of learn over time, and that maybe that moment was for me a pivotal moment in as you say, that's when I became a director, because I started to realize, don't trust your feeling. Like, something seems bad, but it may not be.
Right.
So you got to just like it's like the Winston Churchill thing. If you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah.
Get to the end.
If you're going through a cube, keep going through those doors.
So yeah, there is a million silly metaphors.
Okay, we're going to go a little over. I've got some grace from the producers, and I have 10 shots to shoot, but I only have time to shoot 2 more. So
Yeah.
the next one is called 1 Degree of Bacon. Because if you know Vincenzo, you suddenly are winning at 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon because you've worked with the man. But it's working with actors. And when I watch Cube, I see a young filmmaker and the process of bringing very heightened moments to fore. What was your process with rehearsal and with, did you have time blocking? Like what was your way through shooting at a Cube?
Yeah, I have to think back. I don't think we had rehearsal. Might have had a read through of some kind.
Right.
And you know, one of the things that was hard about Cube is like it was kind of like shooting on an empty stage. Like it felt very theatrical to me, and that was one of the things. And because most of the time it was just a 2-sided set, I had this very limited amount of room. Like if we were to go do it again, we should have split the walls. But the way to take a wall, you have to take a whole wall, and they weighed a ton.
Yeah.
So it was like you
Camera ports. You have a little camera port, right?
Totally. You did not want to be moving walls much. So basically, a lot of the time we had 1 or very often 2 walls out. So my field of vision was so limited. I was like, this was so static and stagey, and but I had really good actors, you know, and my, you know, I'm a drawing person. I used to do that acting in high school, but I come from much more of like a design art. I worked at an animation studio for 5 years, like that kind of place. Over the years, as I've worked with actors more, but I knew this when I was making Cube. The wonderful thing is when they're doing their thing, I just get to relax.
Right.
Like
You're watching a movie. You're watching a movie to see if you're bouncing on anything in that movie, right?
a little bit. You're there to provide information. I mean, okay, so there's Sidney Lumet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not Sidney Lumet. Like, I'm not going, he would do things like put a box around the camera and stick Al Pacino in the box or whatever. I don't know how, magical stuff I can't do. But I have learned, by and large, to listen to actors. Mm-hmm. I've also learned, however, that many actors, not everyone, want to be given direction.
Yes.
So there's often with younger filmmakers, there's a tendency like, oh, I don't want to step on toes and tell them what to do or how to do. Actually, actors really want a strong vision and sometimes just like to be told where to go and what to do. And that's generally what I do. And then they then can come back and go, well, I would do that, or what about this? And then it becomes a dialogue, and that's great. So it becomes, again, that Zen thing of like, going with the flow a little bit. But what's truly wonderful about it for me is like when you have good actors cast correctly, and every director's going to tell you this, there's very little to do except kind of get out of the way.
Yes.
You can modulate, you can come up with things, be creative together, and
You can answer questions that they have. A lot of times they're like, what scene did I just come from? I would imagine in this film, there's a lot of,
That's it.
Where the hell was I?
That's it. No,
was I in the green room?
you're just an encyclopedia. Like, you're there to give information.
Right.
I think that's very often what I look at, as opposed to like trying to steer something. It's more just like providing, lighting the runway for the plane to land, just providing that little bit of light when needed.
Especially with actors at that level. Now, in this section with actors, we have some actors that I've reached out to via the internet and slid into their DMs. So they have questions for you, Vincenzo. Nikki DeBoer, amazing, says, I can't really think of anything to ask Vincenzo that hasn't already been asked or covered, except how much did he adore working with Nicole DeBoer, and why has he made her a lead in one of his films? Soon, right? Soon come?
Soon.
Okay.
No,
All right.
I love, you can't imagine, yes.
And then David Hewlett, who was a bastard and wasn't getting back to me, so I got his sister Kate to actually tell him to check his DMs. He says, I didn't even know I had messages on this Instagram thingamajig. Hello, maybe ask him about his new graphic novel or the music he put out and the difference between those in filmmaking. along with why he insists on making me so uncomfortable and miserable in every film he makes. You intimated this before, but creation is important. We should create. What is the difference that, or maybe the similarities that you bring from the graphic novels and now you make music?
Is a very generous description to call it music. But yeah, like that's how ridiculous this is. I kind of got to a point where I just wanted to make stuff because I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for one of my stupid movies to get a green light. And so yeah, I started, okay, sorry, back in. There's a lot of similarity, is what I discovered. I have no musical ability whatsoever. I love music, but I haven't, if you handed me any kind of instrument, I would be incapable of producing any kind of sound or anything you want to listen to. But on my iPad, which is also what I use to make my graphic novel, there is GarageBand. And I'm a nervous flyer. So what I discovered is like making music on an airplane while I think it's about to crash is the best way to distract me and get me through the flight. And so I did, over the years, I kind of accumulated all these tracks from airplane flights. And I was like, when the pandemic hit, I was like, I should like just finish this off. And then what I discovered is for $40, you can, if it's meets technical special, certain technical requirements, you can put it on every streaming music platform.
Right.
So I was like, okay, at the risk of looking like an idiot, I'll do that. And it was felt good. I made it. It felt really, really great. But I don't think it's good necessarily. I don't know how to judge it. It's like I was a monkey with finger paint. but in my ignorance was part of the joy of it. Because when I make a movie, I have some pretension of being good. Or when I draw, I have some pretension of being good. When I make music, I have no pretensions whatsoever. And that actually, in some ways, I think made it okay, like kind of interesting, because I don't know what I'm doing. But when you have a discipline, whatever it happens to be, I think, in the artistic fields, you start to realize, oh, it's like kind of the same. Mm-hmm. Like there is a structure, like you start to discover structures that are actually like 3-act structures, even in a 3-minute song or 3-minute piece of music. And by the way, you realize, yeah, and you work with sound all the time. You work with musicians all the time. Like you start to realize, I'm editing.
Yep. You're just editing out.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one to guess. Okay, one of the performers once commented in an interview that what they found most challenging about their role was the process of finding the villain in the hero and the hero in the villain. Do you know who said that?
It must have been Morris.
Yes. He went on to say, "I was required to examine in close detail the overall journey of the character." This is from him. Yeah, he gave me the essay. It was awesome. A journey which takes him from a strong, determined, decisive leader, right, the cop that starts, to a dark, unstable, and violent psychopath. I needed to isolate the moments where the two opposing characterizations overlap, intermingle, and eventually give over to one another. These comments speak to the complexity of a well-constructed story that you're creating. How important, how crucial was it for you as the writer-director to craft all the elements, including character, in a way to make challenging for the audience to experience that character? Because it's a hard journey for them to experience. How important was that for you?
Well, I think it was essential because the true inspiration for Cube, if there's one movie I'd point to say, oh, this is a film that really influenced us, and there were a bunch, it was Lifeboat, which is Alfred Hitchcock film. And what was so brilliant about that, first of all, it's on the lifeboat, but it's a Hitchcock film, so it's still very cinematic. And what he does is it's kind of a process, a striptease for characters, where they appear to be one thing at the beginning of the movie, and then gradually, in this rather Cube-like, intense survival situation, they reveal themselves to be another. So Morris's character, Quentin, and you might remember this for having had to read all the scripts, began as two characters.
Yes. Yeah, it actually, there's many characters.
We married them.
And sometimes characters are named after Arnold Schwarzenegger and Harrison Ford as well.
Right, that's Andre.
Yeah. Continue?
Yes, so with Quentin, I think was a very interesting character because he starts off as Arnold Schwarzenegger and then he turns into a psychopath. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting character for me, and I think, for Morris to play.
I think it also, all these questions show the love the actors have for you. which is amazing. And also the enduring legacy of Cube. So the fifth side of the Cube is called Big in Japan. And I just very, in a nutshell, tell me the experience of releasing Cube and how amazingly popular it was in Canada. How much money you made from the gross Canadian box office.
I'll keep this answer short.
Yeah.
It was a disaster here. Well, it wasn't a disaster. It was just, we eat our own.
You have so much expectation, and it's hard, right? Because you're actually releasing a film on film at that time in 1997.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Okay, well, I was going to give you a short answer. Now it's going to be a long one. I'll just very quickly tell you the story. So, finished the movie, edited, done. I thought, this movie's not great. It's not good. I felt bad about my own movie. Somehow we got into the Toronto Film.
Yes, you did.
The first review I read, which was really the only review that mattered in those days, was written by John Harkness of Now Magazine.
Of course, yes.
Who, by the way, I like. Like, I grew up reading John Harkness.
Norm Wilner was here today doing a panel. I love him. He's written some things about my film. It happens. I love Norm.
I liked him before he wrote this review. He is no longer with us, but
yes.
But what I'm trying to say is I respected and still respect him as a reviewer. But his review was possibly the worst review I've read for any movie ever. And they would get either 5 ends, and we got one, and he said, so at least we got one. And he said, this may have been the first sentence, was this movie is beneath contempt. So, this is the review that every single person who is going to the film festival reads.
It's in the festival edition of Now.
So I was like, is that our films? It's exactly what I thought. A disaster, and the screening happened, and
people
kind of went nuts for it, and then it won an award, and it was this whole thing. So again, it was like, worst possible situation. It seemed like it was the best possible results. Was the only reason I mentioned that. I'm sorry, now I totally
It's so important, though, to know, and for the filmmakers in the audience to know, you could be kicked in the teeth one day, and then you can win an award for the thing that you got kicked in the teeth for, and then give the money from that award to your second unit director, so he can make his own short film, Milkman.
Yes.
Which is the type of lovely person that you are.
No, it's only. I know we have limited time. So Japan.
Yes.
And Cube. So once again, I just want to use myself again as the cautionary example. So Cube completely died in Canada as a film, was poorly reviewed, had its 1-week release at wherever the Canada Square is gone. Then, and in the States, got a better response, a little bigger release, but still quite a nominal theatrical release. In Japan and France, it kind of went crazy. Actually, pretty much everywhere.
10 million in France.
It made a ton of money, but it was kind of a slow success. Like, it took a year or two.
But that's back in the day where you could have that.
Right. So I didn't even, I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't know what you have in the first year, the second year. It takes 10 years to know if you've made a good movie or not. Like the movies and what I've consistently found, and I haven't made that many films, but like in the 6 movies or whatever I made, the movies that I felt most passionate about as a filmmaker are the ones that people still talk about. Which was so affirming to me. Splice and Cube were like my the 2 films I felt like had to fight to exist in the world, but they've lived the longest and have had some influence. Like, I think that's what we all have to remember when we make our movies, is like not to expect immediate gratification. Probably the film often, not always of course, but often I think the films that people go crazy for are kind of forgotten rather quickly.
Right. I would hazard to say in that list of Canadian films from 1997, Cube was probably the most cited, the most influential, and the most my generation looked to as like, we got to figure out how to do a Cube. And then you see it in The Platform and in Lost and Squid Game and all the things that come afterwards. How does that make you feel when you see Resident Evil and you see someone getting sliced into a million pieces the way Julian Richings did? Like,
ripped off? Not really. No, it's still great.
It's humbling, right? To know that
and by the way, I like Resident Evil, by the way, and I listened to the commentary, and Paul Anderson credited Cube. So, good on him. And we all take from other people. So, and imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Like, that's really, It's wonderful. No, I never mind I love being ripped off because it means somebody cares. The existential void of nobody knowing or wanting to imitate you is what's horrible.
Okay, my producer, Jen Pogue, is giving me the last side, the sixth side of the cube is called Speed Cube, thankfully. So these are quick questions,
yes,
all right? You ready?
Sorry, I'll try to do one.
All right. Did Andrew Miller's Kazan walk right out of cube and straight into nothing?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there was going to be 6 colors, right? But you can only afford 5: white, red, blue, green, and orange in the cube. What would the 6th color be?
I have no idea.
Come on. You didn't think what the 6th color would
Well,
be?
I can afford to think about it.
Okay. How did Quentin get into that final cube to get Levin unnoticed when those doors make so much noise?
They were looking at it's subjective. They were looking into the light.
Okay.
They got out. They didn't.
Artistic license. I will accept that.
Yes, artistic license.
Would you ever revisit Cube? I know there was a sci-fi series that you were noodling. Would you ever revisit it? Because they just revisited it in Japan. They just remade it, and it's a big success there.
Yeah, modest success. Yeah.
Take the compliment.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right, give it to me. I want to make the video game. I wanted to make the video game. Like when we were writing the movie, we were like, are we writing a video game? No one will make the video game. It's driving me crazy. So the rights are actually reverting back.
Okay.
It's been that long.
Well,
so my hope is
that'd be so good.
I can wrench them away from Lionsgate and then get somebody to make a video game.
Fantastic. Do you automatically win 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon with your friends whenever you play?
I call up Kevin Bacon.
Okay. Are we in a reality or is this world a simulation?
A bad simulation.
Okay. And finally, Vincenzo, you are always so generous and gracious. Thank you for being with us today. You could be anywhere on a snowy winter day. You chose to be with us at the Canadian Film Fest. From the very beginning when I showed up at the Guild, really, I had no bona fides at all, and you were one of the filmmakers that just reached out and just supported what I was doing in Ontario and now at the NDD and now at National. Every time I've asked you for help or for guidance, you've been there. You can't imagine how much that's meant to me. And it's something that I try to emulate and do for other filmmakers because of filmmakers like you. You have a captive audience of filmmakers here, and some of them are advanced. Annie Bradley and Christopher and Sean Nujumder somewhere out there. He just arrived. And some emerging. We just traveled 9,681 days with you. In that travel, in that journey, what would you like to leave this room of filmmakers with as a final word?
Well, we're all in it together, aren't we? I think that's the big thing. I really feel like directors very often exist in these islands. We're, for some reason, it's a weirdly...
Well, you never see, unless you're observing another director, you hardly get to see us work,
No, exactly. I remember David Cronenberg saying, I've never been on anyone else's set. He has no idea. Not that we have to be on each other's sets, but I do think that the spirit of not even collaboration, but just talking to each other.
Community.
So we're not competing. We're not athletes. We're not competing against each other, even though sometimes I think the human mind just tends to perceive things that way. We're actually a collective. So that would be what I would say. Hey, let's all band together.
Well, thank you for banding together today, and a round of applause to Vincenzo. Will you join us in the lounge for a drink?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Jennifer Pogue, take it away. Sorry for going over, producers.
My God, Warren.
But okay, thank you everyone. And Warren's TV show Betrayed premieres on Crave today. Everybody please check it out. From Rob Wells. It's amazing. Stay tuned. We can see Ontario for the supports, and that's a wrap on our 2024 industry programming. Conversations in the lounge.